The Special Collections and University Archives in the Albert S. Cook Library collects materials pertaining to the history of Towson University, history of education in Maryland, World War II, Jewish studies, and performing arts. Jonathan's collection began to arrive to the Special Collections and University Archives in 2017, and what began as approximately 60 feet of compositional materials has grown to almost 80 feet and is still growing as he continues to compose.
I'm Kylie Lewis, and I am one of the archivists at Towson University's Special Collections and University Archives. What I do as the archivist is to get the materials in, go through them, figure out what is part of the collection, and then I physically arrange them, figure out some sort of way to describe them, and then I create a guide for the researchers as they use the materials. Jonathan's materials are really great as well because they take a researcher on a journey just as much as he takes a listener on a journey as they experience a piece.
I think the benefit for someone looking at these archives is to follow an idea from potential into actualization. Since this has every paper that I have written music on and about since, going to the 90s was probably those. I mean, there's student works in here when I was young, but certainly all the major works that I've written to date are here, is to show how these things develop in my head and work themselves out. It's a very laborious, sometimes torturous process. And I myself sometimes go back and look what happened to think about the flow or see other ideas that were rejected. And I find this to be very fruitful in my own writing. Besides the musicological train of thought that someone could see from these archives, there's also a significant amount of peripheral materials that will put the piece in a context. For example, I was asked to write a piece by a grieving mother on the tragic loss of her daughter, and in order to write that piece, the mother shared with me the daughter's letters, paintings, pictures, story about this daughter's life. And these are things that would never make it into the piece. But the background materials, what I actually had to sift through, the conversations, the emails, the pictures, these are all things that greatly, greatly inspired the work itself. Or if I'm writing an oratorio or a choral work, the actual text, because I'll cut out and cut and paste the actual texts themselves, so it's possible to see what other alternate texts were being considered, or conversations that I have with the conductor or soloist, because some soloists have made some very specific requests after the piece is written or during the writing process. So there's a lot of unseen, invisible material. All of my symphonies are like my children in the sense that I care so very much about each one, and each one has its own personality and idiosyncrasies. All my pieces, really. But a symphonic piece is very special because the composer is able to speak from his or her own voice. With the concerto, I have to go through the instrument and make my voice come through the guitar or the violin or whatever it may be. But for a symphony, it's just my thoughts straight out. And the Fourth Symphony has a special place in my mind because it's so broad and daring, knowing that the violins of hope would be used to play the music, and knowing the history of the violins of hope and the gravitas of this premiere in Nashville. The symphony has a very dark hue to it. I use very sweeping gestures, or I emphasize things very much so, sometimes even more than I would in other pieces. So it has a very, very special place in my heart. And you could also see this in the manuscripts. The manuscripts themselves, the pencil manuscripts, show a lot of work and revision and scribbles and things in different colored pens and whatnot. And when it went to score, I made multiple revisions on the score, again in different pens and colors, and writing nasty notes to my copies. No, just kidding, Andrew's great. But lots of communication, lots of changes. In other words, even when it got to the score and it was in some sort of final form, I still wasn't happy with it, and changes kept going and going and going and going. So the archive here documents all of that. And I know that if I were listening to the music following this, I could actually viscerally see and feel those changes going on. And so it'd be cool if someone else could experience it. It's almost like they can get in my head and hear what I was thinking as they see the struggle on the paper.